Well, if people don't know, this is John King, the noted author and best-selling author as well of the Football Factory. You started writing quite late, didn't you, John? Around about your 30s.
I had a couple of little attempts.
Yeah.
I early 80s, I was working in this warehouse that was closing down,
Hmm.
and I started sort of reading more seriously after punk came along.
Yeah.
So I actually wrote this. I wrote this manuscript when I sort of thought I was going to be George Orwell. So it was a future sort of set thing. So I did it over a short period of time, and then I just sort of put it away and I forgot about it. And then in the late 80s, I went traveling. I went away for nearly a year. I went to India and Southeast Asia, and I came back, and then I went away again for a year, traveled around. But then I wrote this other manuscript as like a
Hmm.
travel thing. So I sort of did these little tiny, these, well, not tiny. I mean, that was nearly 200,000 words. But
Oh,
I
wow.
wrote these. So then I was thinking I was going to be Jack Kerouac. So I sort of had these little attempts. Um, but then I'd sort of dip into it and then leave it. And, it's a
Hmm.
confidence thing or concentration thing. And then it was when I got into my 30s that I really sort of treated it more seriously. But I mean, I think the idea was there. So it
Hmm.
would sort of come up and, if I had a bit of space, I tried it and then I sort of gave up. And, you're young, you're doing things, aren't you? You're doing a lot of stuff. So yeah, it was really like in my 30s when I sort of took it more seriously and became more focused. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it, I've got this theory that if you start writing later in life, it's better for you because you've got all that life experience behind you already, and you've read quite a lot of
Yeah.
literature already. Do you think that's the case?
100%. I mean, I think, yeah, I think most books you see, most authors, they start to get published in their 30s. I mean, I
Yeah,
think it's one of those things where you don't actually, it doesn't matter what age you are.
yeah,
And, in theory, you're going to get better and better because you've got more experience of life and also, you're more reflective. Um, and also your writing style can develop. It's like musicians, isn't it? People who are musicians who keep
mm,
going, they get better and better. So, and also, like say when you get, really old, when you can't move around so much to do physical things, if your mind's still working, it's one of those things where you will still be working. I can't imagine ever not writing.
yeah,
So yeah, I think so. So yeah, I made those little attempts at books, but they were very brief. And I mean, I actually found the manuscripts a while back. I thought I'd thrown them away, but when I sort of looked, it's like, oh, it's a bit naive. That's a bit rubbish. But having said that, a lot of with especially with the first one, the ideas, I realised that I took those ideas on in other books like White Trash and stuff.
yeah,
So, but yeah, I mean, I really, you shouldn't be published before at least 30, I think. You know,
yeah,
I really feel that, because you have experience, you have life experience, you have things to write. I mean, it depends what you write, but if you write sort of what they call social realism, then you have those experiences to look at, what places you've been, things you've done. And also you have different views. I
yeah,
think maybe you become less strident and you're more open, you're more open to different views. And
yeah,
but I think it's all wrapped up in your life. Writing is wrapped up in your life, in your where you go in your life.
yeah.
So your writing is always going to reflect where you are, in that sort of genre. So yeah, I think it's a great thing because you're never too old to write your first story.
And the Football Factory, that was your first hit, wasn't it? Your first proper book as well, wasn't it? I guess. So,
Yeah, yeah. That's the
um,
first thing that was published. Yeah.
yeah. So, how did that come about? How did it start to get developed?
I So that was in the 90s after I'd been away traveling, and I sort of was thinking more about trying to write seriously.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started writing something. It was called Threatening Behavior at first. So I wrote something, and I started doing a small like fanzine early 90s called Two Sevens. And so I was writing that, and I so there was another one called Rebel Ink up in Scotland that was edited by Kevin Williamson. So I sort of did some swaps with him, got to know him, got to know Kevin. And I had my first ever thing published in Rebel Ink. The only thing that was published before the book came out. So Rebel Ink was had like Irving Welsh and Alan Warner and people like that.
Mm.
And then Kevin told me about a editor, a publisher, that was sort of taking on stuff, was interested in what Rebel Ink was doing. Um, so he was a great editor, Robbie Robertson. So I sent him some of what I wrote, and it came back, and he said, you got to work on this, but if you do something else, let me know because it's better than most stuff I get. Wrote some short stories. Same thing came back. He said, why don't you think about combining them, and try again. So I tried again, and then I got accepted. So, from when I first sent something to him, it was maybe a couple of years. But I think, and then he published Irvin and Alan and some other writers, Duncan MacLean. So there was just this. I mean, mainly Scottish writers, but there was this really sort of powerful literature that was coming through, and that was all down to Robin, really.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how I got started. Was it came out in 1996, and yeah, I was just really lucky. I think they some books were put on a table up in Leeds somewhere, and they just sold out. And then suddenly the book sort of took off, and I think it came out in Jonathan Cape, which was sort of halfway between a paperback and a hardback. And it sold like nearly 60,000 copies in
Oh,
through Cape, and then it went into vintage. Um, so I was lucky in a lot of ways that I got that contact with that editor, and also that the book sold.
yeah.
So yeah, I was lucky. So it was really like in the early 90s, I think, when I'd come back from traveling and didn't really know what I was doing. And you're that age when you think you should be doing something more than going to the pub and football matches and things like that. So I just sort of gave it a go, really. Yeah, and yeah, I was blessed, really, to be honest with you.
I know it's a difficult question to answer, but where did the characters come from? Was it just observation of people around you, or
Yeah, just invention. But I mean, you draw on, I draw on going to football games, and you draw on the music and all
yeah,
those sort of things. But it's not really any specific person. You're inventing a sort of, a general sort of character to try and reflect different aspects. So Bill Farrell's like an important character to the book. That's
yeah,
the old soldier. Yeah, no. So I was quite lucky. My dad was a bit young to have actually fought in the war. Um, but he joined a sort of TA. Well, it was the early SAS actually, but before they became bigger. And so he was quite friendly with some older blokes who had been at Dunkirk and
mm,
all these great things, the Arnhem Drop and stuff. So when I was a kid, if I went down the pub with my dad, you were around these sort of heroes.
yeah,
He didn't really talk about their experiences, but for that generation, we were sort of raised with the war. It was on television, and a lot of people have been through it, and there was that in our culture. Um, so I drew on that, not on the actual characters, but just some of the ways they were, and I sort of combined different things. So I sort of drew on that, and then a lot of it is made up, obviously, different stories. I think you just do that when you're writing about everyday life. It's you just draw on stuff. You draw on your own feelings, but also your experiences and the things you've seen, things you think. You bring the music stuff. I brought a lot of music into it as well.
yeah,
Um, and then you sort of try and juxtaposition with other characters. So yeah, it's sort of it's not like a straight line. It's almost like layers or loops. I always
yeah,
think of it
yeah,
as a loop. Especially like with laptops and stuff. With word processing. You can write in different ways. In the old days, I imagine when people were writing on typewriters, you just went in a straight line. But
yeah.
now you can write the ending before and you can move things around. So it's
Mm.
like a jigsaw puzzle, really, which is quite fun. I like that aspect of it.
Well, it was about a time when there was a lot of social realism being written, and and there was a lot of people that were quite disaffected, wasn't there, in the sort of early 90s. Um,
Yeah.
so obviously, Bill sort of brings that that link to the past back when there was more sort of like dignified time, really, wasn't it? And he's sort of he's like the voice of reason, isn't he? In the book. Why do you think so many people were disaffected in the early 90s?
I think people have always been disaffected. I think
Yes.
groups of society always feel like they're not represented, So
Yeah.
yeah, book is set in the early 90s. But it's talking about the 80s and the 70s as well. So,
Yeah.
since I can remember, there's always a part of the I mean, different parts of the population, but our part of the population always feels like it's not really represented, or it's talked down about, or it's marginalized, or
Yeah.
insulted, which goes on to today. It's still there. So part of it was Orwell's 1984, which was one of those early books I read. But the idea of the power of the proles, if everyone was united, how powerful they'd be.
Hmm.
So I sort of brought that in a bit, and I was a big Bowie fan, and he wrote Diamond Dogs on the back of 1984. So it's just that disaffection, which I think is still there. You can see it today. So those sort of same things, from the Thought Factory came out 30 years ago next year. Um, but I was looking at the blurb, and it still says the same thing now. And I think that went back into the 80s and the 70s.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I think my sort of feeling is things change, but they don't change. And you have
Hmm.
those repetitions. And in terms of politics, I mean, it's amazing that no one can ever just get that right. Pull everyone in together, which is surely the idea of democracy. So.
Yeah. Hmm. It got mixed reviews, didn't it? Because you had a few people in the sort of the posher papers being sort of quite outraged by it, and then you got some brilliant reviews as well. I think, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of talk at the time of it was glorifying violence and all this stuff, and it wasn't at all, was it? I don't think so. Do you think that it was just misunderstood by those people?
Well, the first reviews, I can't remember which order it went. There was the Guardian, Independent, and Daily Mail. Those are the first three. Because I remember, because I thought, why would they bother reviewing it? So one of those first two said it was politically incorrect. The other one said it was politically correct. And the
Right.
Daily Mail did a word count of how many fucks were in the book. So those were the sort of the broadsheet ones. And
Yeah.
then some of the more regional papers, gave it a more positive review. But it's quite hard to get serious reviews. I mean, it's always been quite hard if you're not in that, in that real mainstream, and they all cover the same. I mean, now there's hardly any reviews, so it didn't really depend on that. It was more word of mouth, really, that
Yeah.
mattered. I don't think most of the people who bought that wouldn't have gone out and bought the Guardian or the Independent, So, but yeah, it was interesting. But in a way, it sort of proved what the book was saying.
Yeah.
It was already there in the book. There's even a chapter with these journalists, these media whores, these journalists who get everything wrong and who are just there for the money. So in a way, it was good. It was good because like I say, it was what the book was about,
Yeah.
you know. And
What
and
do
and to be honest with you, when you get slagged off to however many readers they've got, at first it's like that, but then you sort of realize you don't actually care because
you-
it depends what they attack the book for.
Yeah.
So if they just attack it because they don't like the character, of course they don't understand it. They don't understand there's much more to it. Um, but when they just attack the character because they don't like that world or they think everyone's scum,
Yeah.
then it's not like a serious review anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like they're actually looking at what you've written or the style you've written or the ideas. So yeah, I think very early I just got a thick skin. I didn't actually care that much.
Yeah.
So
So going back to the way you wrote the book,
hmm.
I love the use of your dialogue and the way you've written the language. Was that? I mean, that must be so difficult to get that authenticity right without sort of slipping into sort of parody. I mean, I'm from Yorkshire. If I wrote a Yorkshire dialect, it would come out a bit like the Yorkshire version of Dick Van Dyke So was it difficult to get that sort of balance, to get it right?
Really? No, not really. I don't know. I just wrote how people speak, really. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you think about the context. When some of the fruity language, you can balance that out. So obviously, there's certain language or certain things said, but you balance that. You balance your idea with your story, because often the language that young men use isn't always how they feel, is it?
Yeah.
It's a game. It's wordplay, isn't it? It's mucking
Yeah.
around with words and playing with words. So no, I found that quite easy. Um, thing is also I think you have to write from your generation.
Mm.
Because your slang is a certain slang. I couldn't go out and write a 30-year-old slang now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't try to because it would just be wrong. So it was quite that sort of side of it was quite natural. Yeah, it was quite easy, really.
So it was obviously, I mean, brilliant material for a film. But how did all that come together?
God, how'd it come? Yeah, there was a couple of people interested in it early on. It just sort of progressed and got to a certain stage. Um, so originally, Nick Love he had the rights for Headhunters. He was trying to develop Headhunters,
Yeah.
and then he came into this one. It just sort of progressed, talking to people, and it goes down, and someone recommends someone. So it takes a
Yeah.
few years, and then it starts to get going, and it has stops and starts and everything, and then it all sort of came together. And yeah, I mean, that is 20 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it
Didn't
sort of had a
realize,
bit of an advantage because even though it was like, low budget and low key, um, the book had sold a lot of copies.
Yeah.
So sometimes you get an adaptation where the book's only sold a couple of thousand, but the actual book was well known in those circles.
Yeah.
Lots of people who went to football became extras, and all the actors were sort of, came from those backgrounds. So it all sort of fitted together,
Mm.
in the end. But it takes a long time, because people are investing money, and It's a different sort of genre, so it's made in a different way, which
Yeah.
you learn because at first you think it's going to be exactly like your book. Um, so yeah, it was interesting. Yeah,
I
it was a
think,
bit, it was stressful. I must admit it was stressful at the time because you try and keep involved in it because you don't want it to go the way of so many other things. But I
yeah,
think because Nick was involved and um, so the actors as well, then it had that quality, it had that honesty about it. Really, it's an honest film.
yeah. I think did Nick Lowe write the screenplay for it? Nick Love, sorry.
Yeah, Nick did. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think he did it really well. Is there any bits of the book that got missed out of the film that you wish were in the film?
Um, Not really. I mean, I suppose at the time you think, like I say, you think it's going to be the whole book
Yeah,
when you first start. But then it would be like a 10-hour, 20-hour film.
yeah,
So really seeing the film together, I think books are slower a read, aren't they? They're a read and they can
yeah,
digress and go places and all that. When you're making a film, it's a different thing. You've got to shoot it, but also it needed that energy. Nick was he was really on that and he achieved that energy. So yeah, I mean there's a bit, well, there's a lot of the book that's not in there. It's not as the book is a lot more serious, a lot heavier, a lot more political.
yeah,
Um, but the film works, because you couldn't go into that as much in the film. It would have been too heavy. So yeah, I mean it was a real relief that it was so good. Because you do have to live with it. Even if you're the
yeah,
author, you go in the pub, people still know you're linked to that.
yeah.
Um, you don't want someone walking down the road with a swastika carved into their head, do you? Yeah, which I think there was a film I think that was made like that, wasn't there? Every
Yeah,
time you see like football people in films, they're all a certain type, aren't they? So it's realistic, it's real, and it's funny and it's warm. You like the characters, which I
yeah.
think is a great achievement.
You've written so many other books as well, haven't you? So a lot of them sort of have a theme of like an underdog in society. Um, I'll bring one up, Slaughterhouse Prayer. So I'm a vegetarian myself, right? And I know the premise of the book, but I made myself not read it because I knew I'd get upset by some of the
Yeah.
details. So um, so
No, it's
in
a heavy book. I mean, it's the hardest book I ever wrote.
yeah,
I rewrote it twice. Um, so yeah, I've been vegetarian since the early 80s,
yeah,
probably vegan for 30 years. So yeah, but it was a book that I sort of really wanted to write, and I wanted to get it right, get it do it in the right way.
yeah,
So it came out of a book that I wrote called The Prison House, which is about someone in a foreign prison. So sort of the idea was sort of in that, but it was really hard. It was a hard one to write. Like I
yeah.
say, on and off, it took me 10 years.
All
And
right.
normally, I can write, if I'm really focused, I could write a book or first draft I could do in a year easily,
Yeah,
even a few months if I was left alone. So yeah, I mean, I think with Slaughterhouse Prayer, that was my ninth novel. So that was a sort of book I think where because when you're writing, you're developing. So there's the Football Factory trilogy. Then I wrote Human Punk, which is more it's more based around music and more of an individual. Um, then I did White Trash and Skinheads, Prison House. So the Slaughterhouse Prayer was a book where I wanted to get to because I was sort of going in different directions, and like you say, going sort of outsiders or people who are marginalised or not represented. So the Football Factory books are really about you know white working class males, who
yeah,
don't feel represented or angry and everything about them. Pulling the language apart and showing there's much more to it than just the words and going into the music. And I took that on. So Slaughterhouse Prayer was sort of not consciously, but it was like a goal. So when
mm,
I wrote that, I thought if I never write anything again, or if I die, then I got to where I wanted to go in terms of subject matter and also the style of the writing. So you go through those characters. White Trash is, about forgotten people, really, about the NHS.
yeah,
Prison House, about someone in a prison on the margin of society. So Slaughterhouse Prayer goes beyond the margin society to basically these creatures have got absolutely no rights. And it
Yeah.
goes, and it was hard to buy. It was depressing. I mean, it's depressing enough, probably depressing. Not, hopefully, it's not depressing to read, but don't want to put anyone off. But it was pretty depressing to write. But I got there, and I'm sort of pleased I did. So
Yeah. And as you said before, music's a big part of your
yeah,
books as well. So I was thinking about this the other day, because a lot of your books are involved with like subculture as well, aren't they? So in terms of like
yeah,
punks, football, fans, that sort of thing. Um, and I was thinking, you don't really get subcultures these days. I think we had like the hipsters that came along for a while. You see the
mm,
old 25-year-old goth, but they're sort of cosplaying goths, aren't they? They're not really goths, I don't think, you know. And then I thought, well, you
yeah.
didn't see these subcultures before like 1950, really, did you? It was just sort of that sort of period in time where you sort of had metalheads and hippies and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of stopped now, isn't it?
I suppose if you go back, you must have had styles of hair. I mean, when you look at these old pictures, they have these different styles of haircuts.
Yeah,
But I suppose people they didn't really have clothes, did they? They didn't have access to clothes or fashion. So it was sort of something that
right.
maybe came around in the 50s,
Yeah,
Teddy Boys and things like that. Yeah, so I think it's the sort of thing that was there from the 50s, maybe up until what, the early 90s or late 80s. So I don't know why, but yeah, like you say, so now it sort of seems to blend in together. Um, Maybe music has sort of blended in more as well. I'm not really sure. I don't know why. I don't know why that is. Um, I think the young populations were quite big, weren't they? Especially in the 70s.
yeah.
Maybe it was just like a time of real creativity. If you look at the 70s, how many different types of music there were.
Mm,
It all came up one after the other, bang, 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 bang. Okay, you go back to the 60s, the mods, skinheads. But, then you go into the 70s, you had that sort of heavy metal, that sort of scruffy look for a long time. You had glam rock, you had Bowie, all that stuff. You had soul. Then you had punk, and then you had two tone, and then skinhead revival. You always had, you still had Teddy Boys, you had rockabillys, psychobillies. So yeah, I don't know the reason, but it's true. I mean, yeah, it
yeah,
seemed. I mean, maybe we missed something. Maybe being a certain age, we missed something because kids are really into their music. You know,
yeah,
I mean, they are really into their music. Maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's the way clothes are. Maybe there's a maybe there's a lot more clothes available now, and it's more become more mainstream, become more watered down. I don't know. I mean, if you think in the 70s, people just wore stuff they bought in the market, didn't they? And they shaped their own look.
yeah,
No one was walking around in designer gear or anything. And even when that designer gear came in the 80s, it was really through people, stealing it, like Liverpool and Man United fans in Europe, and then it sort of came back in. So. uh,
yeah.
No, it's an interesting one. I don't really know the answer. I've got to be honest.
One thing I liked about growing up when I did was that I mean, music was a much bigger part of life. Everybody knew it was big news if there was a new group at number one,
Yeah,
and you could sit with your family and watch Top of the Pops, which was very, very mainstream.
yeah,
And like you said, the mixture of stuff on there. Whereas now, I think I don't know. I'm just speaking from an old guy sort of view, but everything seems to be sort of dance music these days. Sort of R&B dance. But then
yeah,
you'd have like heavy metal, and then you'd have like a punk band on, you'd
yeah,
have a novelty band on, or something like that, a soul singer,
yeah,
and there'd
yeah.
be something for everyone. You'd be sat there with your grandparents and stuff, and everybody liked watching the show. But now it just seems to be sort of
Mm.
like a what's the word? I can't think this early in the morning. It's homogenized almost, where it's
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's harder, like for bands, to keep going, isn't it? Because of digitization.
yeah.
Music is it just goes there. They can't. It's very hard for them to make a living out of making music. So I don't know why it becomes so mashed together, like you say. Um,
I've got an
yeah,
interesting
maybe because it's all being made on computers, or I'm not
yeah.
sure.
Well, I was talking to someone that used to be in Visage, and they were saying that the way Spotify works is that you only get a royalty from it, and it's a tiny royalty already.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you only get a payment if the person listening to it lasts more than 17
mm,
seconds. So you've got to
yeah,
get the
yeah.
hook in there as soon as you can.
And I
Which,
think even then, I think you don't really get much for it. So I think, I mean, because I do these human punk nights with a friend of mine, Andy Chesham. We do them at the 100 Club for about the last 10 years.
oh,
So,
right.
we more punk bands, but there are young bands there. There are some really good young bands there.
Yeah,
Fantastic bands. But I think it's just hard to break into that mainstream. Um, but that's with a lot of things are centralized now. It's the same with publishing. Publishing's changed.
yeah,
So, a lot of stuff is centralized. And I think the focus is much narrower now. I see it with literature. It's a very narrow focus, and I think maybe that's happening generally because these big corporations control everything.
yeah,
You know, so with music, the big companies, they control. They have much more control. I mean, you still have independent labels, but people aren't going out and buying loads of physical singles.
yeah,
You know, they can get it on. They can buy it on Bandcamp or wherever. So I think digitization is a big part of that for everything really, all the arts. Because if you're writing or doing anything like that, if you're in band, you still got to you still got to get the time to do things. You still got to make a living.
mm,
So I think it's just become harder, and because it's harder, then it's sort of going back into that old idea where the people who really get to put stuff out, will, especially in literature, will often come from money, because they got that time. So with music, I mean, I suppose I sort of see it. I sort of see the bands that we put on, and I
mm,
can sort of see it's there. I think with like some of those forms of music that we liked when we were younger, you sort of see them surviving more like in Europe or in America.
mm,
Um, so you see these big bands that emerged in the 90s, like Rancid and Green Day, who are modeled on these punk bands or oi bands, really, who are
yeah,
massive. So it's quite strange that we don't sort of our heritage sort of gets moved into the background. Um, so yeah, but there's probably stuff that we're missing, or I think that I'm missing, you know.
yeah. I think for definite, I'm sure that, I mean, I'm not trying to demonize young people, but I'm sure they've got their own sort of
Yeah.
cultures that we're not part of because we're old, you know.
Oh no, I mean the thing is kids love music, they know the music.
Yeah,
They've got the music on their phones and everything. They do love music. I mean, yeah, I mean I just remember when we were kids and the older generation was going, oh, standards have gone down and this, that, and the other.
yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, I can remember some one of our neighbours saying I was going to get four eyes because I was watching the television too much. So there's always that thing, isn't it? And you have to sort of try and avoid it. But I think kids have got their culture. I think they just got there's whole different pressures, isn't there, and different ways of doing things. And
Yeah,
it's all swings and roundabouts, isn't it? At the end of the day, every generation's got the same things they want to do, the same problems. It's just
yeah,
all adjusted with the technology, or you know, and all the political stuff always sort of seems to stay the same in a way. Everyone's always dissatisfied.
yeah. I've got, sorry, I'm going to name drop a little bit, sorry, but it's a funny story. So, I was talking to Martin Ware from Evan 17, and he was talking about technology. And when iPods first came out, he bought one for his daughter, who was about 14, and he put all of his music onto it for her, right? And he gave it to her, right? And then he was quite excited, because she's not really heard his music before, right? So anyway, she was in the bedroom with her friends, and he was sort of, eavesdropping to them
Yeah.
playing the music, and he was gutted because they were just sort of playing the song, and after about 6 seconds, she was saying shit, and then fast forwarding it to the next one, shit.
She probably knew he was listening. It's probably why she did it. No, I know. But then, I suppose it's the same with us, isn't it? We'd listen to older music,
Mm.
and some we'd dismiss and some we'd. I had that with my nephews and my nephew and niece. I was trying to get them into Alvin Stardust.
Oh yeah, yeah.
No, they just wouldn't have it. But I think it's because I made a joke of it originally. But if you listen to some of that stuff without knowing what they look like or how it's perceived now by some people, you know, actually musically. So,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes you have to cut through that image, don't you, and get to the actual music. But it
Well,
all
even,
comes around, it all feeds into each other, doesn't it? You know.
well, even things like the Wombles. I mean, the Wombles, novelty band. I mean, that was bloody good music. I
Yeah.
still quite enjoy listening to it, even though it was novelty guys in suits. But when that was out in the charts, the Wombles visited my hometown of Mexborough in South Yorkshire, right? And I was about 5 or something, 4 or 5 years old. I'd heard them on the radio or something, but I had no idea that, you know,
Hmm.
I've seen the cartoon and stuff probably. My granddad took me to see them, and I shit myself because all I could see was 7 foot tall rats. He had to take me home because I was crying. So,
Did you have a Wombles? Did you have a Wombles uniform?
yeah, yeah. So, oh my God.
You still
So,
got it, yeah? You got an adult version now.
yeah, I still wear it.
Yeah, I had a Batman suit my mum made.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was funny. She said she made me this Batman suit. So I was probably 7 or 8.
Hmm.
And where we lived on this main, quite a big road. And in the middle, there was like a little island. And it was actually, it was almost like a motorway. It wasn't a motorway, but it was like three lanes each way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we had friends on the other side. So what you do is you'd run across, and then when you think about it now, they wouldn't let you do it. But you'd run across to stand in this little on this little strip of concrete and wait for the other side for the cars to go.
Hmm.
Anyway, so she said we walked out and there was our friend uh, from across the road, and I was there in my Batman suit, and she was standing on the other side of my mum. She's holding her hands, and she said she just leant over and looked at me. And she said, "You look really silly." And she said, so she said, "Oh, you never wore the suit again." She said, "I just wanted to push her in front of the cars because I spent weeks making it for you." So yeah, but
Well,
I haven't got one now. Wouldn't mind one.
going back to writing, how do you think
Yeah,
your style's changed over the years? What do you do differently now than you did before, do you think?
I think I write more slowly.
Yeah.
Um, I think I think you develop. So I think
Yeah.
at first maybe it's what you're writing, or maybe you've got all this stuff, full of all these ideas. So I used to write faster. Obviously, you go back and edit, and you slow down and you pull it together. So I write more slowly now.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I think you try not to repeat. I never wanted to keep writing the same book again forever.
Yeah.
So your subject matter's changing. Then you try sort of different stylistic things.
Yeah.
Um, so I always liked writing sort of streams of consciousness, or fast stuff. So I do that, but try and do it in different ways. Or I've tried to write I mean, in this new book, Peekaboo Bosh, I've done some sections where the sentences are like either 1, 2, or 3 words long,
Oh, right.
just to get across the inner way of thinking of one of the characters. So that was quite fun because you can do that, but also it runs in. So I tried to write these blocks of text without using the word and. So it's just getting this character, this vivisection, it's just the way he is, all about control. And he's sort of representative, of a politician or a small-time bureaucrat or bully or someone who just needs control. So they're who's dissecting things, who's dissecting life. Um, so I do that. So yeah, I just sort of play around with those styles and yeah, and you just write more slowly. Um, you just evolve. I think you just evolve
Yeah.
and also you're conscious of not repeating. I
Yeah.
mean, it's quite easy to sort of repeat, you know. When I wrote London Country, I'd written a bit, then I went back in and I thought, so when I started writing it, I was going to use these other characters. But when I started writing it, um, it was really made for Joe Martin out of Human Punk and Ruby out of White Trash and
Yeah.
um, characters from Skinhead. So I had to go back and reread these books, which, I'm always wary to do because you always find things that you don't like. Um, and then suddenly you start remembering little things about these characters. So I made all this work for myself because I had to remember, who had a brother, who had this when that happened to them. So I got there in the end. But you actually become really conscious that you can repeat,
Yeah.
because I had started to write. I'd repeated a few things. Um, so I think you write more slowly because you want to vary stuff, in terms of subject matter, but also style. So which is okay. It's fine. It's what it is, and I think it goes with your age as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm more reflective. So it's partly age. But the good thing about that is actually when you're writing, it's when you go back to edit, it's actually in better shape than if you're just sitting there banging out something with, great big pot
Mm.
of coffee and, you know, some fast punk rock playing. Your actual edit's easier. So
Yeah.
it sort of goes back and forward. And, the edit is really, um, for me, is like the real, as much fun as writing because
Yeah.
you just go back in and you shape it. And it's amazing where you go, what you add when you edit. What comes into your mind, just these things that digress, go off and other things. And then it's almost like every book you write, you've got another two that you think to write because you've got all these other ideas come or, and you get stuff in your subconscious. There's times when I've just woken up and I've known what to write. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of writing is thinking. I know
Yeah.
it's a weird thing to say, but you're always thinking. When you're writing a book, you're always thinking about it, or if you're planning to write a book, it's just in your head. You're thinking about it because it's wrapped up in your life, really.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like I say, I mean it's great. I mean it's just a fantastic thing to be able to do.
Well, Peekaboo Bosh, tell us about that.
So that sort of comes out of so it's a novella
Yeah.
and it's so it's something I wrote a while back. It was a short story, and then I left it. So it was this idea of basically a raid on a vivisection lab. So some characters who go in and liberate some animals. But it's much more than that. So I took the main character from Slaughterhouse Prayer. So he's sort of in the background. So it's sort of after COVID and he gets in with some pacifists, so he's a bit of a different character in Slaughterhouse Prayer. He's much more direct.
Yeah.
So he gets in with them. So he's in there. So it's about a group of people, and so it looks at the one of the scientists, and it's sort of his inner life. So he has his room, but then there's a backstory about when he's young, and so he's very controlling. There's this idea that like as I had in Slaughterhouse Prayer, can you actually work in a slaughterhouse or in the meat or dairy industries and not be angry, not enjoy certain
Mm.
elements of what you're doing? So it's the same with that. Someone can go in and have animals, injecting them, doing all sorts of things to them. I'm sure there's people who don't think about it. They have a certain mentality, understand the idea of medicine progressing. But anyway, this character it's about what he is like. He's a vivisectionist, he's a control freak, and he's representative of lots of people in society at different levels. So you go into his mind and what he's doing. And then there's another sort of thread, um, which I wouldn't really say because it spoil it. So it's like an undercover operation that's got a twist to it, shall we say? So yeah, so I made that into novella, and then there's a short story called Roadblock 2 a.m., which is, as it sounds, about a roadblock in the Guatemala jungle where this bus is stopped by the army, and it's a
Right.
character who's on board, and it's the fear that they might get massacred, basically. Um, so that's sort of quite a straight story because I was sort of traveling in Guatemala in 80, yeah, second part of the 1980s, and I was on a bus that got stopped like that. So it's sort of drawing on that experience. So
Yeah.
it's just after there'd been a lot of massacres of the local population. And this bus got stopped in the middle of jungle, and you're in the middle of nowhere, and it's just the army's there, not too
Mm.
friendly. You just think, is this it? So I sort of I mean, I fictionalize that a bit, but it's fairly straight story. So, but again, that sort of going into that idea of control, you know, you know, the thing that struck me was all the young soldiers were Mayan descent, local, basically local kids, and they all, and then the officer class is Spanish descent. So it was,
Hmm.
why are these kids conscripted and why are they in this position? So it sort of loosely links to the main story. Um, so yeah, I mean that's my third novella. I did a couple of other novellas, so it's a different sort of format. It's shorter.
Yeah.
So it makes you sort of think in different ways. Because usually, I mean, before that, I'd written all novels, which are
Yeah.
like 100,000 words. So yeah, novellas I've written are between 35 and 40. So it's sort of a different discipline. So
Hmm.
it's quite interesting. So again, it's something different, So
Do you ever get into a situation where, when you're writing, that you've always got an outline in your head of the characters? Does this sort of
yeah.
take on a life of their own, and you suddenly
Oh
realise,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 I mean, sometimes, I just start a book like Human Punk. I just had the title,
Hmm.
just sat down and wrote it. And obviously you go back and change it. So, some books you can plan out, other books you just sort of get going. But yeah, there's always stuff that comes, you start and then other ideas come, other characters. Sometimes, often you don't have a plot. I mean, some
yeah,
books don't have a plot. Sometimes you can write the ending first and see how you get there.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, for me, there's no rules, but I know every author has different ways of writing. So some authors will plan it all out and have, sheets all over the walls. But I just sort of, but I mean, then to be fair, there are books that I have thought more of. I mean, The Prison House, I just had 7 sections,
yeah.
one, I'm going to link each one. So there's a prison called Seven Towers. So there's 7 towers in this prison that he's in. And then I had the idea after I think that was the one, maybe one that I had where I had the dream. So then I decided to have at the end of each section, be one of the deadly sins. So you never know what the character has done until the end. So
Ah, okay.
you don't know if he's a rapist or he stole a loaf of bread. So you don't
Yeah,
know until the end. So I think that might be the one that sort of came that I woke up and thought, oh, I could do it this way.
yeah.
Uh, so there's all different ways. Not, I mean, in that sense, I'm not particularly organized, but then I think I am quite a good editor.
Yeah,
So I can be brutal with stuff.
yeah.
I can get rid of stuff.
So when's the book out, and where can you get it from?
Peekaboo Bosh. Well, it comes out on December 1st.
Right?
Yeah, so hopefully if some bookshops will have it, you can get it online. I've got a website. People can buy it direct there if they want. Um, so yeah, so that I'm sort of looking forward to that. I've got a book coming out in America. It's like an author focus book.
Yeah.
So where you write some short fiction and some journalism and like an extended interview. So that comes out next year. So the main story is called Machine Elves Descending. So that's more like a science fiction thing. So I'm sort of looking at doing a bit of that because I did this book, The Liberal Politics of Adolf Hitler, which was set in the future. So I'm sort of thinking about maybe doing a bit more like that. So
Ah,
uh, yeah, and I've got that away. So I'm just sort of thinking what to start next.
yeah.
So I've got an idea. So well, I've got a couple of ideas.
Well, good luck with the book. We'll put a link in to the comments as well for your website. And thanks for the lovely chat, John. It's been amazing. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks.